Welcome to another episode of Catalyzing Radical Systemic Change, where, in my own words, it's all about discovering, mapping, and cross-pollinating what I think are the necessary building blocks towards a planetary civilization ahead. And today's topic, which I'm super curious to explore, is networking reimagined. So I've never covered that topic, which for myself, for the core of my contribution, is kind of almost a meta discourse onto how I build relationships and how do I create values as an agent on behalf of a portfolio of organizations. So I'm feeling super grateful to share this virtual room in between New York and Guatemala together with David Homan. In his terminology, he's orchestrating connections. And when we got introduced a couple of months back before New York Climate Week, I was thinking, that's a very interesting way to sense and feel into relationships, just this terminology of like orchestrating relationships. So, David, like always in my podcast, for me, it's before anything really about the human being. So I'm curious how you would share 2 or 3 pivotal moments in your own biography that link you back to the topic of today's podcast before we then dive into terminology and use cases and so forth. So, David, super grateful to share this virtual room together today. And yeah, handing over to you and curious where you start, be it in your childhood, your adolescence, or your professional life. And yeah, share what made you this hyper connector and built this amazing global network.
Well, thank you, Alistair, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. Pivotal moments, when we think about them in retrospect, they're very meaningful. Generally, when they happen, they're incredibly hard. They're either hard because of some adverse circumstance or some horrible thing that happened, which is one of mine, or they're hard because you realize that something you've been doing you shouldn't be doing, and you need to create radical change in your life to get there, which is a referendum on what you were doing. So I'll take you back to mine. I've spoken about this a lot. My mother hates whenever I call when I turned 12, the year I nearly died, but that's what my dad and my brother and I call it. I was an all-star baseball pitcher. I was good for my age. I blacked out while throwing a ball. It hit some car in the parking lot. My dad took me off the field. Starting 6th grade, that game was right before it. I don't remember. I remember laying in my bed, being weak, being weary, getting bronchitis, getting my blood drawn every 3 days for 9 months of my life, and no doctor being able to figure out what happened to me. I remember quitting piano at the exact same time, giving up, and we got a parakeet whose name was Sweetie Bird, and I watched The Price is Right with Bob Barker, whoever it was, at 11 a.m. And like I did my homework, I was good at school, but no one knew me. I wasn't socially in that dynamic, which is a really, really hard dynamic to jump into late. I have a 10-year-old now who's going to be starting middle school next year, and I'm seeing what it's going to be like for her to have radically uplifted all of her friendships into a new environment with new friends. And I think, dear God, when that was me, I got sick, and it was incredibly traumatic. I went from being an athlete to being an overweight, pudgy kid. It created intense body dysmorphia for me, where even when I'm in great shape or dad bod shape or whatever I am in now, I don't see it. But when you say pivotal moment, right, that was the first moment in my life I felt I fit in nowhere. And as I went through middle school and I went through high school, I got into college, had all these pockets of people, but I never felt like I fit in anywhere. I felt like I sort of fit in. And no one invited me to parties. I didn't know how to be cool, but it wasn't even that. It was this problem, which was everyone thought that I was always doing what I wanted to do because I was an old soul while young, and being sick at 12 made me that in many ways. And so everyone thought I was doing my own thing. I was content doing my own thing. So not fitting in anywhere and always doing my own thing. Now it's what I do. I don't fit in anywhere except for the place that I have built, which is a massive global community around purposeful and intentional connection. And every one of those people that could have been an outcast or fit in but wasn't fully accepted fits in with me because it's all the same story. By being this world of, really ethical, high-end networking, connecting, weaving that in a magical, systematic way, there are tons of us who do it. And I was never alone. I was just by virtue of it the only one in my circle who was that way. So that is my biggest pivotal moment.
Yeah, beautiful. Let me tie into that because what really touches me, and which is truly my first, I always call it like a download when I have a sparkle of wisdom, in the magic space in between two or more other human beings, which is always an emergent faculty, because when two people meet, there's always, the emergent faculty of the we space. So truth be told, I can only reciprocate that because for me, from childhood to primary school to middle school, then my ballet boarding school years and coming back, the first time I felt I found my peer group was actually in university. So I was already in my 20s. And truth be told, it was only always the outliers. And then later, when I started business, same thing here. So it seems to be a common thread, not thread, that those who kind of needed to carve their way into uncharted territory ultimately feel called to be weavers. So, which ties us into today's episode, because what I'm particularly curious is less so only, let's say, staying within one classical vertical, but those weavers that I think we're both most interested in kind of share usually a grand vision. Mine, it's simply how I put it, is a planetary civilization ahead, with us as the human beings being the stewards of this beautiful planet. And this needs weaving across verticals, across ecosystems, across business models. So it needs naturally to go and bridge for profit, non-profit, and hybrid business models, for example. So I hardly ever do that, but I think for the purpose of today's episode, it makes sense to circle around what do we want to cover. And I'm starting and then leading over to you. I think there is still a gross misunderstanding in many organizations out there that have a sales department and a marketing department, and then usually the strategy stays with the C-suite, that there is no predefined role within the organization for a weaver, right? Where both of us tend to feel that this is of utmost importance, even though the immediate ROI from a weaver is harder to measure than, let's say, from the sales department or the marketing department. So that's definitely one thing. And the other thing that interests me to explore with you, when I look at nature, it's all embedded ecosystems within ecosystems. There is not one clear boundary. There's always a membrane around an ecosystem, but it's permeable or semi-permeable. And this touches then the membrane of the other ecosystem. So I wonder, when we try to define what the listeners should get out of the podcast, what are the things that are most crucial for you so that we kind of put the nuggets first out there and then cover them in the subsequent conversation?
Absolutely. So the golden rule, golden ratio, right? This idea of 60-40, what is harmony in nature, how that works in terms of that ephemeral thing we don't value, which is relationships, is crucial to dig into. because relationships are the most undervalued currency on the planet, and they're what makes the planet work. So that's core, right? Then take this to the systems level, right? Natural systems like mycelium networks and all the rest, the way that we build foundational blocks for language, for construction, for everything that becomes a system. We look at the foundation as a core without the people that build the core and extend it. And those are all part of the same pairing, where because we don't value this, the question is, well, who's saying it's valuable? Who's measuring it? How is it becoming something that becomes more commonplace? And then how do we champion the people that are in between, not to feel like they're in between and not belonging anywhere, but actually dominant because they belong everywhere? That for me is the core. My mantra, right, is to make relationship value valued. And by virtue of that double entendre of it valued, relationship value not being valued, there's so many nuances that we make mistakes in and around all the time. So covering that in terms of how it works in terms of business, impact, philanthropy, how other people see siloed parts of these systems and connectors see people, I think is the most crucial part to dig into today.
Yeah, let's circle really around a thing which excites me so much to share with you after more than, I think, 55 episodes, is there's a saying in Germany which says without vitamin B, and B stands for Beziehung, and Beziehung means relationship, nothing works in life. Like literally nothing, right? So as a singular human being, we're nothing without a relationship. Friendship, family, business relationship, trusted companions, mentors, advisors, on an organizational level, supply chain, whatever, the different departments. Though it seems the mainstream paradigm to measure success, usually primarily through a financial ROI, has kind of left the human dimensions out. So I want to put that front and center, because for me it's almost like a koan. You know, when you sit in a Zen monastery, they give you like a paradox to reflect on. So how is it possible? Because the higher you climb in the pecking order, the more you become aware that an advisory board, a CFO position, a CTO position, an anchor investor, whatever that may be, it's all built on trust. So you can't move anything without trust, and every relationship moves at the speed of trust. But it seems to be like grossly underestimated how valuable relationships are, and hence how undervalued this possible chief relationship officer is. So before we dive into the solution space, do you have like any idea why that is the way it is?
Yeah, because human nature makes us invariably selfish, and we focus on our wants and our desires instead of our needs in terms of our psychology endlessly. So you talk about the people who have climbed up the power of the trust. If it's working for them, some of them are incredible people and great connectors themselves. Other people have been able to take advantage of it endlessly for years. That is the nature of besmirching these relationships. Everyone I talk to in any position, Alistair, connector or not, they get it. The difference is that there's nothing to hold people accountable for how they treat relationships, especially if they get more and more successful. And there's only the detriment and the negativity put to many of us for asking for something because of a value we put together. And this is why I say to people, it's like you have to keep it simple. Relationships equal what we put our time and our money into. Therefore, in my opinion, they sit above time and money. And those are the two currencies we value. Our time with somebody, what our time is worth, what we get paid for that time, what we do with our money from getting paid for that time. And what do we do with our money from getting paid for that time and while we're doing in the rest? Everything, as you said, it's contingent upon relationships. Therefore, in my world, I choose the vernacular very, very strongly. if you are not honoring the relationships, you are dishonoring them. If you are not adding to your relationship value by your actions, then you are diminishing it. And since everything in my world comes back to studies of power, the systems of power, who has the gold, who doesn't have the gold, in the end, those of us who get to that elite or that success did it with relationships, and now we have relationships that sustain us, but not everyone who got us there in many cases. And that is the single biggest flaw in our societal and evolutionary development, is not focusing on the village when we say all the time, it takes a village.
Yeah. Trying to slow down. So what comes to mind is from the prior conversations is, instead of thinking about relationships as a Gantt diagram, like there's a human being that I scouted, and what's the maximum of ROI I can squeeze around that person, and what's the most efficient way to do that? It's more a dance, right? So there may inevitably come transactional situations, but ultimately, if I honor the relationships first, I'm almost obliged, I would say from a moral perspective, to let the transaction go, which is kind of a conundrum, right? But once I trust that, in that metaphor of a dance, I trust that there is infinite abundance, like literally trillions of dollars circulating around the planet, like so much talent and so many languages and cultures out there that could fulfill a particular need of an organization or an ask that we have the task to find the solution for. But when I get let go of my own projection of ultimately that I think that particular person needs to fulfill that need, then a much broader, I would say, ecosystemic approach arises, that I trust that there are like infinite possibilities out there. Because I mean, you hold thousands of relationships, I hold thousands of relationships, and this then becomes a space that mathematically we can't even comprehend, but giving it the metaphor
Yeah,
of
yeah.
abundance, right?
So let me offer a visual analogy for this, with the caveat, right? Because you're totally correct and brilliant in everything you're saying. The fact we can't visualize it or see it strategically is what holds us back from understanding how it actually works. And every study in physics and everything in sciences, until we understand how it works, we can't backtrack to understand what we can do from it. So I look at this, and the two terms, either they're called a vector cog or a cog vector. If anyone's been to like a children's museum, it's a gear, and in the gear is that circle, and around that circle are the different spokes. And when you turn that and you connect with another gear, usually it's like 5 or 6 spokes around it. Every 6th time it comes back to you. So what people look for is, I turn this gear, when's it coming back to me? And the answer is, hey, there's all these other spokes that are also touching. What are you ignoring? And then when you look at a chain of connections, because a chain link fence is only strong because it's multiple links together. You put 2 together, you can pull them apart. You put 20, it's much harder because it's a combined friction and dynamic. So you talk about natural, right? Circles are nature. Overlapping circles are nature. The Olympic logo is overlapping circles, and the in-between is what matters, but we can't visualize that in-between until in the cog vector, you take 1 gear, you take 2, you take 3, you take 4, and you turn 1, and all the other 4 turn. And when that 5th one, that 4th one in the chain turns back to you, people go, oh my God, that's why Google got to Fitbit and bought Fitbit, because they were looking for a sale. That's why all of these transactions happen, because people were matching, in my world, asks and whys in relationships together. But it takes a chain, and that chain, from what I've studied, can take 2 to 5 relationships for something substantial and 3 to 5 years. And tell me what human being or what technology, and I'm building my own to solve this now called Sort Connect, what technology can hold that in our space of leading our lives? The answer is no one can, except for connectors who can see it, orchestrate it. Not only can they see it or orchestrate it, what they can do is they can serve as a catalyst for it, even without knowing the end result. We've trained ourselves to hear people, to catalyze their lives, and to add to the value they couldn't see. So when you get down back to business, right, and one of the initial points, yeah, no one can see it. You met a family office. Why didn't they invest? It wasn't for them. Shame on you. Or you met a family office, an ultra high net worth individual, and they took their time to talk with you. Let's see in the next 6 months to 2 years if they come back and they introduce you to the Walton family. And that happened to a friend of mine. An impossible thing became a possibility because of trust and respect that things could be relational without being transactional. And then when the interaction becomes transactional, everyone goes, oh, of course. But they ignore the work in between, which is the relationship building without an agenda of an immediate ROI back. And that's the fallacy of how we look at these turning gears, is that we look at when it's going to turn back to us, our business, somebody we're paying. We don't understand how hard it is to get 5 gears turning in sync to deliver an incredible outcome, yet it happens over and over and over again right in front of us every single day.
I love this analogy of a cog vector. I would say that's my second aha moment in this interaction with you, because I didn't have that present. And most likely I will use that terminology, if you allow, for what I do.
Oh, yeah. I also have I got really cool graphics I can send you too. I had one of my designers build it so I could see how these things work. And there's lots of cool, especially startups that focus on these neural networks and how to map it. The biggest challenge is not just how they connect, but the strength between them. That's what I study. What makes something fully trustable, fully strong? What makes somebody pull out somebody that they know everyone else wants to talk and to offer it? And so the cog vectors are not all equal in size, strength, and distance from each other.
No, absolutely. I'm a very visual person, so I'm offering you the metaphor that came to mind. I think most people think about building strategic relationships as playing pool billiard, but which is more the sales approach. I think what we're doing is playing snooker. And everybody, I don't know if you have ever watched snookers. I love the World Series. It's insane when you see these masters, in this complex interwoven patterns, and then they play 12 different, sets. And then you're like, how could he possibly do that? This is just impossible. And this is actually the magic of weaving. The other thing that I just want to second is, I would also say that generally an engagement for less than 1 full year to engage with, usually, I think we're mainly both engaging with organizations, though those organizations may be headed by a founder, GP, family office, whatever, is less than a full year of building a relationship to play that snooker game, right? And put this cog vectors into place, because much like you say, often it's not that one person, but the second person or the third person or the fourth person to then win the play for the organization. So time, trust that the relationship building comes first before becoming transactional. What would be the other ingredients for, becoming a master weaver or orchestrating connections, like yourself put it?
So 2 questions in that question. Let me answer the time one first. So yes, it can take a year. It can take longer. It depends on the network one's built and whether somebody values the skill set and what they're asking you to build. And what I always do is I put this back to people themselves. I had a client years ago who was very impatient. They thought what they had was better than sliced bread, to use that metaphor. And then every time I talked to somebody, someone was like, "It is just sliced bread. I've seen that before." And they were getting impatient. And I was like, "Listen, I want to hit you up on something. We've known each other for 2 months now. I want you to invest in this thing." He goes, "I don't want to invest in that. We're just getting to know each other." And I go, "There you go. You just turned it, right? You want this to develop for a long time, but you want me to find people who don't have your discernment. Do you want those people in what you're doing?" And the guy paused. He was like, "Take your time." Because you just had to put him, in this case, in somebody else's shoes. So, two things right for the other part of your question. In the book I'm writing, I've tried to define out what makes a super connector. And there's lots of different type of super connectors I can share. That's one of the things I'm holding off till the book comes, because I hopefully think it's good enough that it makes it go viral. But what I'll say is, a connector can understand the culture and the diversity of the room, the network, the environments they need to go into. They can see some of what that system of relationships is. When we train to approach this, our instincts that we hone are around curiosity, and in addition to curiosity, not just empathy, but really understanding how to have generosity in how we interact. And therefore, you're giving and giving, not giving for an agenda or giving and taking, as Adam Grant's famous for saying and writing. So when you take that culture and diversity into curiosity and generosity, and then you act with these relationships with honor, you build the trust as fast as that is possible to build. Because if you're going to give something first, something might come back to you. But because you're giving into an ecosystem, you have to expect it to be given back into your ecosystem. Hence the problem always, Alistair, of not being able to visualize it. You can't understand who knows whom until you've triggered them enough in a positive way for them to act back with the graciousness that you've given. And so that final point, and everyone sucks at this, how can you be completely clear and purposeful and intentional while embodying that humility, but also being clear on what you need? And how do you define it so it triggers people for seeing that what you need is something greater than just what you need and aligns with their passions? It's, in the end, extraordinarily sophisticated to do this right. But I've studied thousands of connectors, and everyone operates with some variation of this basic premise of making people feel heard and valued, surprising them with offering instead of asking, and then imprinting upon them what would be valuable that's greater than just what they would need. So when somebody jumps in, they're jumping in selflessly and selfishly at the same time. And when connectors do this right, yeah, it takes time. It's hard to visualize, it's hard to build, but when it happens, then everyone goes, "Great, you got me to Tom." And you're like, no, it's not just that. I built an entire ecosystem. As you said before, of a portfolio of companies, I built a portfolio of people. And those are all now in your ecosystem.
I want to share a metaphor. Maybe that's a new one for you. I don't think it's a new one for you, but the metaphor that I mainly use also on my website is that of gardening. So I come from a family of gardeners, like literally 4 generations, and now my brother. So I think you need a strategy, you need the curiosity, and you need to trust that overall, over a couple of years, this garden, right, will become an ecosystem, but you can't control every single piece of it. You need to be aware of the microclimates, of the soil qualities, the different forms of like composting, the curiosity to try new specimen that maybe before have not been in the ecosystem, even more so because of climate change. You know, who would have thought that my brother, who lives in the south of Germany, has suddenly a fig tree in his garden that like really provides an abundance of figs? He was rather like, I try it out, I don't think it will pan out, and now he has a very beautiful fig tree in Germany, you know, that can even survive the frost, meaning the minus temperatures in Germany. David, I know it's not so much your turf, but what you built is really outstanding, at least to my own knowledge, because I don't know when that was, let's say 4 months ago or so, or 3 months ago. I did not know you and I was not aware about your network and your ecosystem. So I think without overly promoting it, like what's the genesis of why did you start building it? What were the multiple iterations? What makes it kind of a really unusual global network? So let's please give this a proper 5 minutes, to like what are you actually doing? How did you start building it
Yeah,
and where are you
yeah.
standing?
So one, I'll do it in 4.5 because I want to spend 30 minutes to say I grew up gardening. My family has green thumbs. Like everything around me are like massive plants and trees. Like we grew everything in my parents' garden. Our closest friends, the Librans, were farmers. We went to their farm. Like we helped them. We saw how everything grew. And so for me, that's always been part of my foundation, my mental health is having plants and an ecosystem of that around me. It's one of the things I hate about living in New York is I don't get to have that type of nature the way that I would like or the way you have from your normal background every day. But I chose to be in an ecosystem of people for what I love to do. And that's a lot of what my origin was. So let me give you a quick version of what happened. The summation of my life is because of two powerful relationships. One was from my adopted grandmother in Florida, my mom's best friend, who introduced me to a friend that got me my first big job, that taught me the power of building relationships. The other was from my brother's high school friend, who's my friend, who introduced me to one person that got me to another, that got me to a big family office. And in the aggregate of these two people, named Doris and Bronny, they were the catalyst for everything I've built now, that I never knew they were the catalyst till I realized I had not thanked them or studied this to the extent that I do. So I stumbled into this, right? Like now we can both have the eloquence of, the portfolio of relationships and relationships at the speed of trust. But like when you start to do this, you stumble in because there's no Bible. There's no book about this. There's things about gathering, network building, but there's not about activating people with purpose and network weaving to the extent there needs to be. I'm hopeful the book I'm coming out with my co-author Noah next August will be that. So, want to know how this happened? I met a bunch of people in the world of fundraising. Most of those people told me no. I used that as an opportunity to go, well, if you're saying no to me, then what do you like? What do you need? Most of these people were philanthropists and now family offices and CEOs. And once they kept telling me what they needed, I started to match what they needed to other people. Then because I gave them value, even though they gave me no value in terms of a donation to the charity, eventually I realized the people that I liked the most, that I was attracted to, were all these people like you and I. And finally, they started all just calling me. I was their number one call. In many cases, I still am for things I have no knowledge about at all. Med tech, for visual impairment, for whatever it might be. I go, I don't know, talk to Amy. They're like, Amy's the perfect person. I go, okay, cool. But she's also a super connector, and she's imprinted on me. That's her passion and network. And so I realized, because I'd always convened people, that I needed to convene the conveners. And I started with one event. Everyone who walked into that room was the most connected person they've ever met. When I met you, you also said you're one of the most connected people you've ever met. I always say with humility, absolutely. I don't have the best network on the planet. I have the trust of everyone who does. And I created a system to value us for being able to build that. So that's what orchestrated connecting is. I am not the conductor, the composer, the maestro, the first violinist, the principal bassoonist. All of this, all of the people in my network are the best I've ever seen. What I do is I orchestrate it. I put everyone together, and sometimes it takes a year, sometimes longer, sometimes a day. But I eventually figure out in the system I built how to get us to do the thing that is the fallacy of all of this, which is you have been super connecting with systems thinking for years, and we only met a few months ago when I've run the dominant connector organization on the planet for 9 years. I have no peer because everyone who sees it joins it because it's not a business, it's a purposeful community. It's greater than me, it's not about me. It's about solving that efficiency of what connection should be for us so we can then better demonstrate it and help and support each other and solve that problem I said I always wanted to solve, which is to make it more valued, this world of relationship building. So the catalyst of this all comes from stumbling in by necessity, not seeing it soon enough, making mistakes around it, being too fearful to make it my own business. Launch a startup took me 6 years to start. Getting a book out there took me 4 years longer than I was ready for, because I was struggling to make my world work and make all this work until everyone was like, well, what do you mean? You've been doing this. You're always doing this. And I'd go, well, yeah, but I'm just convening people. And they go, no, you reframed the way I thought about my own value, and you reset and served as a catalyst in my life from 5 minutes of telling me why you stand for what you stand for. It's what I stand for too. And that's when I realized I had created something that will always need to be approached with humility while also being great, because it's not about me. It's about a framework, a way to change the way our world works better as a system, to move from tribal to purposeful communities of intent.
Wow, there's so many beautiful things to unpack. So I want to share what really fascinated me the most from the get-go is that at the nucleus of your organization, you're not charging, which creates a boundary condition, a set of values within the ecosystem that incentivizes the others to approach their own strategic relationship building from a point of curiosity, trust, generosity. So that's the first thing. The other thing, and that may sound a little bit theoretical, but I think I can get it over in few sentences, is I think you are and we are, meaning all those hyperconnectors, network nodes, we are forging a new cultural paradigm. The cultural paradigm moves from, yes, out there, right? But maybe not with the first or the second or the third relationship. There may be a transaction, but ultimately we trust that based on the relationships we're building, there's an infinite abundance of possibilities, investment, the right team members, the right IP, the right joint ventures, whatever there may be. Because the sheer mathematical numbers, I wouldn't say they're infinite, but I mean they're in the trillions and quadrillions, right? So I think the question that I want to ask you is, and I can start very honest, that like forging that new paradigm ahead for me was incredibly difficult. It was very fun, but it was very difficult to find a business model attached to it. Because usually in our mainstream paradigm, people only get transaction. And this comes even more so maybe from my background, that I did my whole professional career sales. But understanding that sales, which is ultimately purely about transaction, is really something very different than building long-term strategic relationships where then ultimately around one, two, three, four corners, that specific transaction can happen in a magical way. So I'm curious to hear from you, like maybe some of the pitfalls you encountered in the last years, and where are you standing with your business model for yourself as well as, let's say, for the organization?
Yeah, it's a great question, because everyone I know who's seen my business not work for 4 years thinks I've built the way to make connection as a service work. And I am endlessly struggling to refine it, leverage expectations. So let me tell you what I'm not. I'm not somebody you hire because of the Rolodex I have. I'm somebody that you hire because you believe I can build an ecosystem. To talk about painstaking, I spent 9 years doing it. I have proof of concept in the tens of thousands, and I still have to convince people of my value still being at the height of this. That's pretty hard. What's also hard is that everyone generally wants your value and they'll pay you after you give them your value, but not for working with them while you have the value. And that, honestly, it pisses me off. I can see it coming, but you want to get frank, right? I see it happen every time somebody goes, hey, I want to pick your brain for something. And I go, all right, but I'm a strategist. If you want to pick my brain, people pay me for that. I will just grab coffee. And they always say, I got this brilliant idea. I put millions into this thing. If you can find me millions for it, then I'll pay you. And I'm thinking, you have millions. You built something. Why didn't you build the relationships around it? Now you want everything I've been building that I maintain. And you're right, I don't charge for my network on purpose. I do charge, actually. You give your time. You've given a lot of your time to building our relationship that could prove to be nothing for you, but something for your friends. So you are giving me something as I'm giving you something back. And the people who don't value that, like, fuck them. Seriously. Like, if you have means, you have ability, you know you want something to happen, and you put all of your ego into it, then you want somebody to give you everything that they have, their relationships, their network, and their ability to do it, hand it over on the hope it's the right fit. And then from that right fit, then you'll make money. Where in the world of the US, I can't send somebody a deck and say you should invest in this thing. I'm not a licensed broker dealer. I don't do that type of work. I can find alignment and build ecosystems and make relationships and position people well, but it's the longer term where the value comes. If you want the short term, especially when you have means, like, you're part of the problem of taking advantage of it while you have enough to go around. So this is what I face still all of the time. I'm lucky enough to be successful enough to make everything work. I'm building for my future. I'm not saving for my future. And I'm one of the more successful people doing it who wasn't born from privilege to then have all these relationships. I made every single one. So here's what I found works. When you find the right alignment with people, you need them to de-risk you and you need to de-risk them. So my business model works on retainer and equity, but never just equity, never a commission, never a referral, never something where I'm giving value and not getting something back, because that devalues the skill set I bring to it. The other thing is, and this is the most important for my network to understand, that although I am going to get paid to deliver value for certain things, most of my value is in the people in my network who I built trust with. And no matter how much I'm getting paid, it's never enough to pay all of them for the value they're giving. So I ensure for everyone where there is an upside that I know what can be ethically and legally done to support the chain of connections to get a result. Because people don't invest enough in that ecosystem. And when I do it right, the success takes time, but the success is then seen to be worth it. And when I don't do it right, I have people that were jumped the gun too early for the value they thought. Because everyone looks at what they have and, oh yes, if everyone just sees it and I get that pot of gold on the other side of the rainbow, then great. Then I'll be where I need to be. And most people don't understand they need to assess where they are, how the market feedback, how the responsiveness is. Are they positioned right? Is there competition? How many people need to leverage this and add their reputation to it for something to be saleable, investable, charitable, whatever it might be? And that's why I always say the work in this world is to build an ecosystem of relationships. Enough of what Ray Dalio calls that triangulation, but multiple triangles that eventually make a much larger network. And it's really hard to do. It takes time. Most people don't want to pay for it. They want immediate outcomes. And most of the people in the position to respect that have enough means to do it, but they don't have to. And somebody else will give it to them for free.
Yeah, again, much to respond. So I think what resonates most is the fact that you are aware that you are a pioneer. And most of us are. Secondly, if you one of the listeners feels called to do the work both of us and many of us are doing, don't expect it to be like a simple role, right? A cookie cutter, easy thing to figure out. And thirdly, I think, at least on the level we're both working, it needs a certain maturity of an ecosystem to really be able to offer the value add that both of us can provide. And the last point, and maybe in that we're different, is the 17 years of my whole professional career, ever since I left university, have always been on the forefront of what I call systemic change, which has to do with like the next iteration of impact investing. It has to do with think tanks that try to figure out global governance. It has to do with total portfolio management strategies for institutional investors. It has to do with like very bold endeavors that nobody has figured out, but where a small niche globally, right, which makes my network so valuable, they know each other. So, and maybe lastly, and this took me, wow, over a decade to figure out, my ideal client does not only invest into Alistair, he ultimately invests into my ecosystem. So he's not optimizing one on one like his organization and Alistair, and then Alistair is kind of a head of sales. That's the wrong understanding. He invests into 17 years of relationship building on the forefront of sustainability and impact investing. For example, that's my niche. And I always tell people where I have barely no ties, I exactly do the same like you. I'm like, okay, I've never touched like media or mainstream or Netflix or series. I never even had a television. It's like a completely foreign world for me. Whereas with all these complex sustainability and macroeconomic questions, I feel very comfortable. And I always know I have like, a tie here and a tie there and a tie there, and can always recommend people off the back 5 to 6 really outstanding experts or family office or investors or think tank people. So I think what I'm trying to synthesize is like, from all those super connectors that I know and that you know, who really have that maturity in order to recommend them or point them into the direction of really building a business model around their network, which frees them of the transactional quality that they alone, need to provide the value add.
I was I just want to pause to recognize you, right? The fact that you've done this, the way you described it, the clarity in it for all the listeners is important because most people aren't that clear. So I just want to say you were exceptionally clear in the length of time, in the type of focus, even without naming specific people. Now I can even think of more people that fit that alignment or people you probably know. And if not, my job is eventually to find them for you. People are not that good at that, even that have the maturity in this. But I do want to say, right, every other job, you apprentice, you learn parts of the job, then eventually you get to the right level. You and I at the higher levels of these as pioneers in this space. But anyone who wants to approach it just has to reframe how they look at the relationships they've built. They come from where you grew up, the people you go to school with, the people that you work with, the people you socialize with, that random person you meet on a train when the train's delayed for 3 hours. Like, the world is not random. It can be more intentional. You have to open yourself up for the possibilities and the serendipity of it. And the best of us don't work in the silo of, well, you and I are doing a podcast. Then I have meetings in the city. I'm going to go to my meetings. The person that stands near me at my meeting, if the two sisters I'm meeting are late today, might be the person I was supposed to meet today. And so we have to maintain this idea that all of our maturity in these networks isn't just about the most known, visual, connected, famous, rich, whatever might be person. The value is in anyone who builds that trust, wants to build that trust, or sees the necessity in it. Because in my world, right, the best of the people in my network, they are all system change agents. And my master plan, right, like my diabolical plan, if by the time I'm 60, which is 15 years from now, so will hold me accountable when I fail, but I want to fail trying. Imagine a world where all of the power that exists has somebody connected to our networks that we trust, connected to each other. It's not country to country, system to system, family office to family office, World Economic Forum to all the different variations. It's a network, a systemic network of trust of people who see beyond themselves, look at the way the world needs to go, and then there's an entire structured ripple effect of that chain that doesn't take years. It takes the snap of a finger. This is the technology I'm building. It's the network that I've built. It's why it's all about everyone being a servant leader in what they do. Because I believe we can systematically change this, not by being at the forefront of it, but taking what is commonplace and normal and flipping people's perceptions of how to value it and where to value it in their lives. Because if we all surrounded ourselves with 5 people who were positive in our lives, who helped us stay healthy and accountable, who we could lean on, that didn't bring us down or have undue influences and really saw us in the potential of where we were going, every single person would be in a better place by having that personal accountability, then be more systematic to the idea that it is all about community. And so that for me, like when you talk about system change and the real goal, the answer is yeah, it could be everyone I meet. And I can't discount somebody because they don't look like me or talk like me. Or when I say I grew up without a network, I also grew up as a middle class professor's kid with a father trained at Princeton and Harvard, teaching at a university where people around me grew up with friends who were farmers and lived poor as farmers, and that's still what they do. And their potential and my potential are drastically different because my privilege of an educated upbringing gave me what less than 20% of Americans get, which is a college education. And for me, that was normal. And for a lot of my friends I played soccer with, that wasn't going to happen. So if we don't understand how to tap human potential, we lose that potential. If we don't understand how to value the people who see all of this in relationship building, we miss opportunities. And if we continue to live in a world where power is about keeping it as opposed to giving it, and in a system where it's literally there's enough food, money, and everything to go around, and I'm not talking about some communist world of let's give everything equal, I don't believe that happens. But I believe wholeheartedly, as you can probably hear with the passion in my voice, that what has to change is that we have to value the people who bring people together more. We have to value them for doing it for something greater than themselves. And when we create a system that champions that, the world will be better because opportunity will no longer be missed. Talent will not be shirked or unseen because there'll be an entire group of villages that collectively see where people fit into this world and what they want out of it, as opposed to you and I having advantages. Most people, and probably no one, most likely most people listening, have a university or college education. And all I'd say is, for all of us, we grew up with something that we should be able to create greater value in, because once somebody sees the potential of somebody else in being able to build this, if that's nurtured and there's more value in what we do, that's where systems really change, in my opinion.
Yeah, what touches me is I hardly ever have somebody share such a grand vision. So I want to reciprocate sharing my vision. So it states,
Great.
catalyzing radical systemic change towards a planetary civilization ahead. My timeline is somewhat congruent. The only thing is I want to be like radically down to the bones and my musculars, I want to be active up until I'm 70. So my timeline kind of ends 2049, and 25 years from now, it seems we have the same age. I just turned 45 this year. What do I mean with a planetary civilization in health, ecological abundance, and peace and harmony with all sentient beings on this planet? I also don't think it's a woo-woo communist, I took too much plant medicine vision. What I mean with that is that when I'm 70, and I strongly believe that's possible, we have pockets out there that try a different vector, to use the analogy, where well-being for human beings, but also for the other sentient life forms, so let's say animals, but also trees, bushes, like all of these gardening metaphors, they thrive. There's more biodiversity, there's more soil health. There are people in school systems that are working, or at least trying their best to not like leave most of the people out. So I think what is the emerging paradigm is like we see a paradigm at the very end, like kind of crumbling, like kind of a 500-year imperialistic, colonialist, white male supremacist, extractive system crumbling. And on the very fringes, right, on the fringes, all these super connectors, many of them very fortunate with an amazing background and a lot of wealth, are just trying to do something different. So, for the sake of our conversation and to make this a loop back into your ecosystem that you build, is what I found is, and I think that would be one of the recommendations for those listening, is a weaver and not a sales guy is not the perfect fit for every organization. I think you need a certain amount of downstream capacity within another organization in order to handle the opportunity spaces we're creating. So I'm ending before handing over to you, and I will not mention the name, but he has been on my podcast, and he is the founder of a think tank. He was the only human being that I asked more than 5 times to engage with him. And he always told me, Alistair, I think we will engage. We may engage. The time is not ripe because the maturity of my own organization is not ripe in order to handle the opportunity spaces that you're creating. So I hope that made sense, to tie the grand vision into where are human beings like Alistair, David, and the many out there who try to make a difference and work on the systemic change piece, a good fit for a certain type of organization. So I wonder, without you mentioning names, what is a good fit for David, and if you can abstract for that for the other, super connectors and weavers out there.
Sure. So the one thing I'll say, a lot of this ends up being very simple. You want to have more people reconnect with nature, they should go to nature. You want to have more diversity in your network, ask for it. You want to have more value for what you're giving, say it's valuable. Like, these are very simple tenets we tend to forget over and over again. So I'll tell you the most important person for me. Somebody like you. I need people who I don't have to convince of this value. I need people who act on it and demonstrate it and live it. And if I can bring all of those connectors into one systematic community, I mean, it's exhausting. I've talked to all 1,900 people who've joined my community since I started, but it's riveting because I'm not the right person for any of those in my network. I am somebody who built a system so all of you can meet the right people through it. Eventually it comes back to me in terms of my business, my philanthropy, my creative projects, everything that's happened. So the right person for me, honestly, is somebody who has influence and power, who has become curious and started to see the world a different way, and I can tap the right people in my network into their world and create change faster. That right person is somebody who has recognized that the ecosystem they've built is flawed. They run a business, there's no women in leadership. They run a business, they've never met the people who work for them, who make what they make for them in another country. Anyone who's come to any degree of consciousness that the way they've been following things has been more blind than they would have liked. And what I can do in my business, but in my network more than that, is awaken them to an opportunity by putting them in touch with the person like them who's further along in that journey. And when you literally see the footsteps in front of you, it's a lot more easy to follow.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I usually say the perfect fit is a person at the cusp, at the end, or transforming from one life phase to another. I wouldn't say it's completely devoid of age. There are outliers, but I usually would say it kind of starts with mid-30s. Could be somebody insanely successful, early exit. Just got introduced to a guy who sold a hedge fund in his early 20s, for example, or another who is GPing a fund and was investing like into more than 80 companies in hard tech. But it can also be people that have spent the vast majority of their life in very tight organizational constraints. They worked with one of the Fortune 500 companies. They're like more in their like mid 50s to early 60s and suddenly say, you know what? Actually, I don't feel like retiring, but also I don't really know what I want to do. Just become another coach. And then at the very end of usually a life cycle, people that are still strong and powerful, people in their 70s, sometimes in their 80s, who still want to contribute, who have then more this role of I would call them like a wise elder, but they still want to contribute, but they almost, want to hand you over a treasure trove of wealth, power, relationships, and basically just, ask me, hey, Alistair, how can I simply support with an intro, with an investment, opening a door for you. So that's kind of just sketching like the people that I'm usually interfacing. Did I miss like a persona out there?
No, you were extremely clear in that type of persona for you. And it's somebody you mentioned who's come to a certain level in their life, or what they've built can be systematically nurtured to keep with your planet and plant method, practice, and grown wider, deeper, stronger, broader because of your expertise as a catalyst in that. And when they tap into the ecosystem you've built, because you're clear of what your ecosystem is, then they can immediately have more effect from it. That's extremely clear in terms of your model and your why for how you do it. I take a slightly different view because my intention wasn't to build a massive global business. My intention wasn't to make millions of dollars with getting people the right people from it. I come from the world of philanthropy, and in essence, my real world is as a composer. And I want to write that one piece of music that sits with you, that changes the way you start every day. And if I can do that right melody enough times, that gives me value. And no one can take that away from me, whether they think what I do is great, average, or less than that. But when I translate that in the world of orchestrating connections, the right people for me are the people who see this as a catalyst for them to be the right people. I don't want to be the most famous in this. I don't want to be the richest in this. Even if my tech becomes the new standard for how we connect, that's great. You want to know my problem? I sat in a world of philanthropy for 17 years where people did things with slight variations, told me they were different, and didn't contribute to the greater goal, the greater good. I've sat with thousands and thousands of the richest and most famous people on this planet to be told in many cases how what they're doing is the best. And everything I've done is to try to bridge that trust so that they can trust each other, do something bigger than themselves, and solve a problem instead of solve part of a problem. And everything I've studied around power and the way the world has worked for centuries Power hasn't changed. How we look at it, the clothes it wears, the height of it, the color of it, whatever it might be, is changing. And in some cases, changing for the better, but it's still power. It's still control. It's still a currency that is becoming, in many cases, a current. And when we realize that that current has to get back to its natural flow, then the shepherds of that, those that don't make it wayward and don't go against the grain, against the stream, are the ones that can get us to a better consciousness. It's not just that woo-woo-ness. It's not just the spiritual healers. It's not the people that are elevating consciousness. It's not just the blockchain, Bitcoin, Web3 pioneers. It's anyone who looks at human nature has to focus on human nature first. And when the nature of power takes into account, and this is, I know what a lot of what you stand for, the harmony of how to get closer to that while having everything we need, we get closer to your vision, because I'll probably fail at 60 and then you'll take it on till 70 and I'll go, yeah, I was the gateway to him. We named it on the podcast on November 20th of 2024. Because in the end, I want to solve the problem. And the problem is that what happened to me that I had the intellect and the grit to overcome, most people don't. And those are the people that are really going in this next generation to change the world, and our current system doesn't nurture what I believe needs to be nurtured for it. So if I can help connect all of us to nurture each subsequent generation to have this value be better valued, then we don't look at the other as the other anymore. We don't look at power as white men. We don't look at diversity as adding a token person to our world. We don't see it that way. Because if, as I said when I started this tirade, like in my world, when I'm writing a book on this, like there's a whole chapter on diversity, and I said to my co-author, Noah, I was like, you know what I want the chapter to say? Diversity is important, ask for it. Now maybe the whole chapter. Because it's literally that simple. I said to a guy who's in Texas where I run an Austin network, he's like, what do you need from me? I was like, more people at you at my next event. I don't want 2, I want 20 out of 40. He goes, really? I was like, yeah. He goes, okay. It's not that hard. You just have to set the intention for it. You have to understand that to change the system is to change the way power is represented to be more equal to the way our natural power and our diversity of our world is actually already organized. Because I never wanted to go to an event where it's 3 women. I don't go to an event where it's half women. If they're half the population, they should be half of every event, period. And I do that. I've done this for 9 years. And you know how? Broken record. I asked for it. It's not easy, but it's actually not that hard to set the intention and the value. And therefore, when there's more, I recognize it. When there's less, I go and I say, what more could I have done? And people make this so hard, so complex. If you're not championing something, or you're letting your apathy and your indifference say, well, you know, I tried, you're part of the problem. Recognize that, have the cognizance to see it as a problem, and course correct by being intentional. More people will respond. You'll have more success, you'll have more value, and you elevate so many other people that deserve it, that simply get overlooked, and therefore don't get to build the type of networks you and I have built as privileged white men.
Towards the end of our conversation today, what gives you the strength, the confidence, the courage to be so uncompromisingly committed to your vision? I can give you my answer for my life and my network and my purpose, but what is it for you?
As we wrap this up, I was a 12-year-old kid who went from running a 7-minute mile to a 15-minute mile. By seventh grade, I could run a 10-minute mile. By eighth grade, I was back to 7. And I didn't think of myself as fast or with endurance. And very few people, except for my family, supported me on that journey to get back. No one helped me re-socialize. No one recognized this or even asked about it till I started to do the world of podcasts and added that vulnerability to my world. No one gave a shit because they didn't have to. So what drives me are the outcomes of what happened when I say I have to. And when I can convince everyone that that is not just selfless, it's selfish at the same time, the act of generosity, of gratitude, of honor, of asking for diversity, of being vulnerable, of having curiosity, that these things are strengths to embody, not weaknesses, then no one can prey upon me. No one can push me down, because what they're doing when they push me down is making themselves a hypocrite. Because if I ask you to be honorable with a relationship and you're not, I basically just called you out for being dishonorable. If you run a conference or an event and there's 2 women there or 3 people of color out of 50, I call you out on it. And I tell you I won't participate unless you have more diversity. And then I say, will I be able to help you? Can I help you? And I'm making you have a choice. Do you want to accept help to build that mandate, or do you not care? And so what's made me confident now, which I was not even 5 years ago, is I built something of enough substance that works with that value system, and everyone who sees it goes, oh my God. And I go, I just put in the work. I asked for all these things. I start every new conversation, as we started, with vulnerability. It's not just, I'm this powerful connector. I built this thing. You want access to me? What's it going to be? Want to pay into it? There's so many people that put their ego and their wants in front of it, and those people are not helping the world, even if they're helping part of it, because they made it something that put them at the center of it. And many people around me my entire life that have the ability to champion me, to really support me. And when pressed, I could name 7 who really did. Not cheerlead, really did. 7 introductions in my world changed my entire life. And I am responsible for thousands for changing others. And it's not enough. So you asked that question, right? Like, I don't want it to stop because I can't. Because somebody else needs what I didn't get. And they have nothing near the opportunities I've had to be given it.
Wow. Wow. My closing words. And I'm getting intentionally a little bit mystical here. You know that I have a lot of tattoos. The first tattoo that I got was "Thy will be done" from the Lord's Prayer on my left forearm, which is the arm with which I receive life force. With the right arm, I give life force. That's like with what I write or chop veggies. So I would pretty much end the same, I'm doing what I'm doing because I'm following a calling and strongly believe my spiritual practice and my visions and being called to at least try to steward, I think, the greatest transition that we as humanity have ever been on. And I would say the same, if you want something, do it. I had 4 mentors, all of them female, right? Because I come from ballet, I don't know, oddly enough, all my mentors have been female. Very powerful, very exposed women, like insanely successful. And they always told me, Alistair, just do it. And it took me a while, because it's a rough patch, an uncharted territory to not just get employed and, a safe paycheck and whatnot. They just told me, get up again. Just do it. So I would say that's my ending words, David. I'm feeling really grateful that life really makes us connect in between ecosystems. And I'm just grateful for this really beautiful, vulnerable, very deep conversation. And I hope the listeners can take, their nuggets of wisdom out of it. David, do you have any closing words? I really don't have the feeling I need to say anything more.
I just want to echo when you talk about having four female mentors who saw your potential and then really convinced you to go on that path. I'm grateful for them, never having met them, for how you show up in this world and what you do, and grateful for our mutual friends who connected us. I think that if we were all to think back to those people that were the catalyst, the one thing I'd say to you, Alistair, is when was the last time you thanked them, those that are still living, and told them how grateful what they did for you is? That simple act of gratitude, it can be strategic, but if anyone's going to take anything away from this, it takes so little to give that, and it will sit for months or years with those people to know that they gave your life more meaning, all of us here talking and listening, and we don't do it enough. And it's that act may never come back to us, but it feels great to do to others. So that would be the challenge. Don't listen to this podcast. Try to contact me. Try to contact you. Work with us. Yes, that'd be nice. All the world of making things easier and more systemic. But what if you could listen to this and your one action from it is to call up even just one person? Just say thank you and tell them why. And ask nothing of them except for to say that. That is how we create real change. Because then you're acting with honor, and then you feel that way, and it's a ripple effect into your entire being and your entire life. And at some point when you make that a practice, that does come back to you. Because we want to honor those who are honorable first and foremost, but we all have to lead with it first. Human nature living on this planet is way too hard for anyone in any situation for us to think of that above ourselves. And that's the way we actually make change, from those who changed us first.
Thanks, David. I could not agree more. Thanks for the conversation.
Thank you.